電機と天才トリップ・ホーキンスが世に送り出したマルチプレイヤーだ。
It's a new experience.
それは全く新しい体験。
Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Episode Tarek in our continuing series of 3 Doesn't Suck, and I'm here to convince you why, and if you can't tell already, we are playing PO'd. When I first decided to do this series, I wanted to pick my favorite 3DO games of all time, and while PO does not make that list, and I'm not trying to say it's a hidden gem, it's a very distinct, unique game that definitely deserves praise for its ambition and outside-the-box thinking. And obviously, if you can't tell already, this is the reason PO'd is famous. This enemy sprite right here, it's exactly what you think it is, no question about it. But what PO'd lacks in refinement, 100% makes up for in sheer ambition. You probably never played a game like this when it came out, because we're just running around this little area here, shooting enemies like you would in pretty much any other first-person shooter, but you can just jump completely out of this and fly around the entire screen. PO'd has so much verticality and so many massive maps. It's definitely a maze, and trying to find the finish to any one of them is going to be a near impossible task. But the fact that developers decided to make something like this and were able to finish the game and release something that is playable is in and of itself just absolutely so much fun to see. Because this game was not developed by a massive team, it was actually done by just a few ex-Sun Microsystem developers who decided to leave the company and go into video game development. If there was ever a game that was a bedroom game, a couple of coders putting stuff together in their spare time, then PO'd is 100% that. But what they were able to achieve is actually very impressive from an engine standpoint, because PO just plays unlike anything you've ever seen before, for better and sometimes definitely for worse. But I just love the character and charm that this game has, and I'm willing to forgive a lot of iffy gameplay if you can tell that they really love the property and were trying to do the best they could with it. Something like Virtual Highlight on the Sega Saturn might not be a good game, but it has ambition and charm, and I'm always willing to reward that, and that's what PO'd has as well. From the weapons arsenal to the small attention to detail to all of the different very strange enemy design sprites, you can tell the developers had an absolute blast making this game, and they really did care about what they were making. As the stories go, they basically took all of the first-person shooters they've loved to play and decided to take mechanics from each and every one of them and try to build a game out of that. And what I love so much about PO'd is the versatility of the jetpack. Pretty much every level is going to require you to fly around, and that just opens up so many different movement techniques. It's going to be a lot of fun just exploring the level and seeing what comes next. Like these giant booger monsters here that just undulate and shoot snot at you across the screen. It's nothing special, but it's so unique and so well designed from just a fun standpoint that you can't help but fall in love with the game a little bit for what it was trying to do. And that's the thing about video games. They don't always need to be good to be fun. PO definitely would be like a 5 out of 10 on the good factor, but it's like a 9 out of 10 on the fun factor just by how wild it really is. It definitely can be a corridor shooter, and it does break up the gameplay between flying around and actually landing, but you get such a good arsenal and you get to destroy so many interesting enemies. It's so much fun just to see it. And the game will troll you. That door right there doesn't go to the next map, it goes out to space and you can die. But it's just one of those games. It's never going to make any top 10 best 3DO games of all time list. It might make a top 10 worst 3DO games of all time list actually, but I love it for what it's trying to do, and that's the thing about gaming. So much of this generation was just learning how hardware worked and understanding how to actually develop games, because for every id Software and Doom, there was some company like any channel making a PO'd, and that's not to knock the developers of this whatsoever. I find the game fun and charming. It's just saying that not every single company had the resources to dedicate to game design like it did. But again, just flying up here onto these platforms, seeing the real-time transparencies through these platforms, and just flame gunning all of these butt monsters running around on their legs, it is a sight to behold. It's a game that you're never going to forget playing, and it's probably a game that I would assume 99 out of 100 people watching this right now have never played before. So leave me a comment down below and tell me if you even knew PO'd existed. I'm sure that anyone who knows this game is probably just going to know it from that one enemy sprite right in front of you. Now I will say it's definitely feeling like a budget title, and as far as the soundtrack is concerned, there basically isn't one. It's mostly ephemeral audio, but it does work in the context of the game. It's basically library sounds with a little bit of sheen hum in the background, but it does kind of build up an atmosphere along with the jetpack to make it feel like you're flying through a living, breathing machine. So while there's no soundtrack to speak of, the actual sounds are pretty good, so go ahead and listen just for like 35 seconds or so, and I'll come back and tell you way more about PO'd. So at least you get some good sound effects because there is no soundtrack to speak of, but some levels will be way more linear and they're not going to make you fly around as much. This courtyard level here is just one gigantic shooting arena, and actually when you do this in PO'd, it feels a lot more like a traditional first-person shooter, and it works a lot better. I love the flying around mechanic, but a lot of levels based around that are going to cause you to land on these tiny little platforms and have very close quarters gunfights. This is going to let you have this big arena shooter against all of these robots and different monsters flying around, and it just is awesome. And I will say the arsenal in this game is huge. There's a weapon for pretty much every enemy, and they're all fun to use. There doesn't seem to be a bad weapon here. Even if you get stuck and you start swinging your frying pan around, you're going to be having a good time destroying the enemies. And you'll see here where the entire arsenal opened up, you get so many things like this rapid fire plasma chain gun. It just works. If you're wondering why you had a frying pan and a meat cleaver in the first place, this game barely has any story, but the story that is there is you were a chef on a spaceship. All of the space marines were killed when the aliens attacked. You woke up from your cryo sleep and you decided to take on the entire alien horde. It is basically a tale as old as time. It's the storyline of Doom, the last space marine, but except in this instance, you were playing as a chef with an apron and not a marine whatsoever. But apparently he's pretty good at combat because he manages to take down all of these aliens so well. Now on the technical side of things, the frame rate is relatively decent, you're seeing it as it should be, but just the sheer scale of volume that they could put in these levels, they are huge, they're massive, you get to fly around all of them, and you definitely get to get lost in them, because I will say, trying to find an exit in this game, again, is an exercise in futility, unless you use the map, which is actually relatively impressive as far as maps are concerned from this era and generation, because it's not a flat 2D map like you would see in Doom, you actually get a real-time wireframe of the level. Kind of feels a little bit like the entrance scene from Escape from New York where Snake Plissken flies into the island of New York that's now a prison island. It's definitely hard to navigate the map, but it is fun to look at, and from a performance standpoint, getting that wireframe in 3D is a really fun time. Because like I said, pretty much every level in this game, you're going to be flying around all over the place. You have a walk icon denoted by those feet, you have a run icon denoted by running shoes, and then you can turn the jetpack on and fly up into the air and attack your enemies however you want. And that really is the fun point of PO, the sense of exploration and the idea that a few developers in their spare time were able to make this game. Because this is how most games were made back in the day. For every large company that made something, 3 or 4 people made a game as well, and a lot of the companies that still continue to make games to this day in the late 80s and early 90s started with like 3 or 4 people all coding together in one room trying to get into video game design, and that is what PO'd is. It's an attempt to leave Sun Microsystems and develop a video game for the 3DO console, and I think they did a better job than they did a worse job. And that's the fun thing about doing videos like this. I can tell you that a game technically isn't good, but it's still fun and worth playing, because you're never going to have another experience like PO'd. It is worth checking out just to see the technical design standpoint alone, and all of the verticality and flying around with the jetpack. The textures are definitely pixelated, and it definitely looks like it's running on the 3DO, but all of the colors, all of the sprite design, all of the mechanics just have this sense of charm. You can tell the people that made it love doing it, and that's all I really ask for out of a game. I'd much rather play a bad game that was designed with love and they attempted to do their best than I would play a AAA game that is technically outstanding, but on the soul front doesn't really have any charm in it whatsoever. And it seems like the developers didn't do much after PO'd either, because they're credited with one other game that they helped co-develop for Sega called Vigilance, and I've never even heard of it until I found that doing research online. But if you're going to leave a legacy behind, if you've only really made one game as lead developer, you could do a lot worse than PO'd. It might not be the best game of all time, but it is such an ambitious and weird game, it can't help but get into your brain and start being memorable. So I'm not telling you to play this and you'll find your favorite new game of all time. I'm telling you to play PO and you'll find a really interesting experience from the mid-90s that's synonymous with the 3DO. Sure, that I'll see you guys next time. Go get your frying pans. Bye bye.